have to say it's recognition of what I don't know. I don't know it all. And I was able to get for those areas that I would not become, like I am not a CPA. So at some point you had to get away from the, what would you say, the payroll clerk to the financial manager to the CPA. We had to grow with that. And I've welcomed trusted individuals to come in and take a look and advise me. And I've been blessed with being able to get very good people to join this company because of our corporate culture. And I just attribute it, I guess, maybe it's just relationships. Maybe it's relationships that have been the secret sauce on making that happen. And I think it's going to continue to do that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Break Free podcast. Today we have with us Brian. Welcome to the show, Brian.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I love your background. TechSource is right at the center. But before we start our conversation, Brian, can you give me your full name? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
My full name is Victor Brian DeAndrea. I live in White Rock, New Mexico, so in the county of Los Alamos. And what was your additional question?
What do you do for a living?
Oh, I'm the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board of TechSource Incorporated, a science and engineering consultancy that has been in business for a little over 25 years.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
That's amazing. Science and engineering consultancy. In what fields specifically?
We have focused on nuclear science and nuclear engineering and all those things that come with high consequence operations and safety envelope and so forth associated with nuclear activities. Everything from experiments to dealing with the materials, working with applications of nuclear science.
That's intense, to say the least.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it is. It's what's funny about it is I'm not a nuclear engineer. I'm a more of a environmental engineer and general engineer, but I have surrounded myself and found my way into TechSource when we were very small. And I had the pleasure of working with lots of very, very experienced and very well-trained nuclear scientists and engineers from our national lab system throughout the country.
That's beautiful. I had a similar experience, Brian. I got hired as a senior manager for IT for this chemical laboratory. And I'm just a computer scientist. So I go there and I have all these PhDs in chemistry asking me questions and telling me technical language that I never understood. So what I did is I grabbed one of my senior developers. He had a degree in chemical science and he was a computer scientist. And he was always translating all the events until I finally got a little bit of what they were talking about.
I had a very similar experience. The two founders, Pierre Grand and Tom Ward, were linear accelerator experts in nuclear applications for experiments and so forth. They'd worked on Star Wars applications and things like that. And I was very fortunate to work closely with Pierre, who is a system scientist for accelerators that could, these half a mile and a half long linear accelerators, that he could look at the entire system and talk about it. So I was under his wing for several years before he fully retired. And then with Tom Ward, who's a Sputnik kid, that he has brought me forward with the nuclear science side of it. So I don't know whether just being around them enough, I'm able to understand what's going on. It's been very helpful and important.
That's incredible. And what happens with people like us is that we I don't know how got the God-giving ability to manage a business to make sure that the numbers make sense and to create a profit. And if you add that a little bit of the side of the technology side, then you have a beautiful management position, right?
Yeah, indeed, and that very well articulated. It's the running of the business is very different than having the technical idea. And uh, my experience on being able to work with those, we'll call them systems engineers for lack of anything else, people that work in the broad areas of these technologies, yet also grasp what is necessary for the business to function well, is actually the culture of the company. We have found a very popular place for us, the fact that we can bring together these very technical, highly experienced, highly credentialed people and the people that were responsible for managing these high technology programs. We bridge that gap between technical and management. So my own personal experience with the company is very similar to what the product of our company has emerged as a discriminator for us.
That's beautiful for sure. And for me, nuclear and the whole industry is fascinating. If you think about it, one of the greatest discoveries that we had was when we were able to figure out how to leverage nuclear technology and nuclear energy.
Mhm.
And look what has been happening in the world. Like, for example, where I live in Ontario, Canada, we have a nuclear power plant and it's been operating for many, many years. And the result is we have 99.9% clean energy. All our electricity comes from that, right?
I think that's the Chalk River plant.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. And then if you think about the military use, how can you have a nuclear submarine that doesn't need to go up up above the water for over 20 years because they're running a nuclear reactor that powers the whole thing?
Well, my I wish my COO was on. He's a former submariner, very proud submariner, and those are fascinating systems. Those are technological achievements, and we are blessed with a Navy that has done so well at knowing how to run those with fantastic safety records, and it makes me comfortable that the resurgence in power plants would be drawn from a lot of the experience of the Navy and other areas, that we know how to do this. I find it really a shame that there's so much of the public that is against this, or has traditionally been against it. Things have really changed in the past year with energy demands, that it really is one of our best options, and we really should pursue it with great zeal.
Right. I mean, like, how many submarines, nuclear accidents have we had in the past? I think zero, right?
Yeah, in the sense of I don't know, since I'm not a submariner, I don't know what we would quote, but it's been an incredible safety record. Of course, the initial days of learning it, there were some problems, but you just never hear of anything now.
Yeah, this is when I find kind of ridiculous, right? Like, another one, I get into politics, but when you have NGOs pushing for environmental changes and a green earth, and then you look at Germany and they shut down their nuclear power plants and they start burning coal. I'm like, what? And this is like, NGOs forcing people to do this. I'm like, what are we doing? We should actually keep investing in nuclear energy, make it safer and cleaner, right?
Yep. And TechSource actually has a few people that have been involved in the new direction of small modular reactors and heat pipes and things like that. That there are ways to deal with this. The lessons of the past have not been lost.
Right.
It's just time for us to actually deal with it for what it really is, and less about the mystique around it that was, in many cases, quite negative.
One of the last things that people had complaints about using nuclear power is how do you actually get rid of the residual, right? The radioactive material that is after all the uranium is expended. But now, they were asking Elon Musk, and he said, "Why don't we put it on a ship and send it to space?"
Well, that's a very expensive way to deal with it, but I would never discount an Elon Musk idea. He has proven us that he can deal with very difficult challenges. But if my former business partner and the former founder, Dr. Tom Ward, was on the phone on this call, he would explain to you at length that since the 1950s we've known what to do with it. And it includes recycling it and reclaiming the active uranium to put back in the reactors, and dealing with changing this high level waste into lower levels of waste, of which are much more manageable to use. But we have to. There are I think don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure it's an executive order that was written in the 1970s that said we were getting out of the recycling or the recycling business. You have to go to France, if I'm remembering correctly. I think it's France, Japan, and Russia to get these fuels recycled. But there's a way to reclaim the active uranium, which would be the high activity uranium, make new fuel rods, put it back in the reactor, use them some more, bring them out, recycle them again, and the waste being left behind would likely be very low level waste. It's a much different waste stream to deal with and manageable. So it's an engineering problem. This I'm pretty confident Mr. Musk would say it's an engineering problem. We can deal with it. We just have to commit to deal with it. So yeah, we would refer to that as closing the fuel cycle. You have how to, again, the objective would be how to get it from high level waste down to low level waste, which again is a much easier thing to do.
It's beautiful. I would love to see that, implemented. Like I remember a few years ago, people were coming up with the ideas to have a trailer size nuclear reactor that could power up to 10,000-20,000 houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like the utility, if you think about it, how big can a submarine be? And if you actually employ the entire size of that with new technology, we could really be solving the energy problem that the world is facing, right?
I think so. I think we're compelled to explore it and compelled to support it, because in the end, fossil fuels are limited, wind is limited, sun is limited. They have significant limitations, and the breakthrough on batteries and so forth may happen, but we know what to do now. It's the concentration of energy that can come out of one of those plants is a compelling argument.
Right. It's incredible. And the solution to me is there. I mean, we've been using it for years and years and years now, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Brian, how did you get into this? So let's look back in your life. Did you go to school? What did you do after high school?
I'm a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and whenever you say you're a graduate of the Academy, you have to say what's class year. Class of 1984, because it's a big deal to all of us. And I went into naval aviation from after I was commissioned an ensign in the Navy. I became a naval flight officer in the electronic, what would be referred to as electronic reconnaissance carrier-based aviation. Did that for a while, and then ended up back in the command that dealt with designing and getting new aircraft systems built. And part of my job there was the protection for chemical, biological, radiological. That radiological had a big piece. And so it was time for me to leave the Navy, and I joined a consulting firm that got me involved with the Department of Energy. I was initially involved with the Environmental Management Initiative to clean up the sites that had been somewhat neglected, that end of how to clean them up, and eventually gravitated back into defense programs where the nuclear stockpile is managed. And since then, I've been involved with the nuclear stockpile since the late 90s. A small consulting firm, TechSource, with 2 full-time employees, recruited me from Washington, D.C. to come out here to the Santa Fe, New Mexico region to prepare the company for continuation and growth when the at that time already elderly founder he just started the company when he was 68, I think he was,
Wow.
when he started the company. And when he got to the early 70s, he said, hey, I'm really not interested in working 20 more years. So they hired me away from the large company and brought me down to Santa Fe to structure the initial strategic plan and the growth plan and help manage the company as a chief operating officer. And we've grown from there. I've been living in New Mexico. I've had the great honor of working with Los Alamos National Lab closely for over 20 years. And in that same breath, TechSource has been involved with all of our national laboratories in the country over the years in differing points, linear accelerators, and again, applications of nuclear science, nuclear engineering.
That is beautiful. So you were at the birth, basically at the birth of the company, and you actually are responsible for the growth and sustainability of the company.
Yes, I joined them. They were 3 years, well, 2.5 years into their business. They'd already been profitable. They already found a footprint. But again, the reality to all of us, the aging of one of the founders, they needed a little bit younger view and somebody that really knew government contracting, because that's where we did most of our work. And they were willing to take a risk and bring me down from DC, and it's been quite a ride since then.
What took you out of the Navy? What did you leave? Because you were an officer, right?
Yes. Why did I leave, or where did I live?
Why? Why did you leave?
At the time, I was very interested. Naval aviation is an amazing set of people you get to work with. But as things go, at the time of my the area of expertise I was in, I wasn't sure I wanted to pursue that for 25 years. But more importantly, if you remember the budget cuts of 1992, my class of 84, got caught up in a lot of that, and they were downsizing the Navy. I was not forced out by any means, but the realities of what that meant over the next several years and what I wanted to achieve professionally, and most importantly, what I wanted to invest in the lovely new wife I had, Dana. We thought that perhaps out of the Navy was a better path, because being an Air Force brat, she'd already moved to like 17 times or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So she was not afraid of moving, just wanted a little bit more stability, perhaps.
Yeah, military life is tough for sure, right? Like my brother-in-law is a retired general, and yeah, the moving parts, like holding a family, moving all over the place is not easy, right?
Not easy. And her parents did a fabulous job. Very grounded, wonderful. I married, as my COO partner says, I'm punching well above my weight. And what I ended up getting to be blessed with, being able to find a spouse like Dana. And she had a very tight-knit family that really treasured their time. They were in the States. They were in Japan for 3 years. They were in Germany for 5 years. Really appreciated that. But our path took a little different tact, and we moved to New Mexico. I said, for a couple of years, let's see how this goes. It was 23 years ago now. So
thank God you found stability there, right?
That's right. That's right.
Throughout your career, what has been some of the most difficult times, and how were you able to overcome them?
In my initial days was learning this new industry. You come out of the service, and you're looking at this government contracting, and in this case, high technology science consulting firm, a national one, and just it's fast moving, and just shifting gears to learn that industry and get your feet underneath was very, very challenging. That was the early 1990s. And so that was one of the major challenges. And then the second one was taking the chance to move from the multi-billion-dollar consultancy down to the $2 million consultancy, which was essentially, in all intents and purposes, though they had that kind of revenue, they were still a startup because they had none of the structure associated with that was needed for the longevity of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to shift into that small business, but challenging, yes. I would say more challenging than difficult, because it really was wonderful working with Pierre and Tom and these amazing people that we surrounded ourselves with, and working through those early years. And then the shift began. The most challenging parts were, no, let me switch back. The most difficult parts, the challenging parts were always got to go after the new work, got to get to, you got to keep hiring and so forth. But the difficult parts have mainly been around growing and scaling to that growth. The company's systems can't stay the same. You're hiring your bandwidth, a CEO now, and that they all change dramatically as the company grows. And to grow a company from 1 million, to grow 10% for 1 million is $100,000. When you're at 100 million, worrying about 10% growth, that's $10 million. That's a large government contract, an annual contract. So, and then all of your accounting systems, the structure framework that you need to be accountable and be auditable and that type of thing, all have to grow at the same time. So I would say 2008, switching an accounting system, 2012, the federal sequestration budget, and again, about 2015, we experienced a lot of growth and our systems were not keeping up. Very difficult. And so many more people in the company. There's a lot of humans involved, and humans are wonderful to work with, but it can be very, provide a lot of variability, right? Those were difficult times, but the blessing I had were incredible partners in the early days, and then my classmate joining me in 2018 to consult, and then join the company, and then continuing to focus on hiring. I had a former commanding officer of mine that's a management consultant, very very helpful. He said, "You're working with all these A+ students." He goes, "You have a greater need for that quality in your infrastructure because you have so few people in there. There's no 30-person staff." And it's interesting, obvious observation maybe, but that comes with a price, right? To get those top shelf people. And it was through his guidance, his sagely advice, and then knowing where we were, that we shifted gears on making sure we had very good people, even in the back office. Now, a lot of companies, I found a lot of companies don't watch that as closely because it comes with a price. But being able to have these great people around me to grow with got us through those difficult times.
It's so important. Like when we started the podcast, you were saying about the culture of the business, and it's true, right? Like if you don't focus on the people, if you have B and C players, when you face a crisis, most people go bankrupt because the quality of the people is not there, right?
Yes, and the COVID situation with us, we had to migrate to the cloud almost overnight. We had our headquarters building all of a sudden right at the front end of COVID, with the COVID on top of us and what that means. The roof became a catastrophe. We ended up having waterfalls in the office, so we had to save equipment and so forth.
Wow.
And it was our people that stepped up. We figured out how to get on the cloud. We figured out how to do virtual operations, and those were challenging times. They weren't as difficult, but they were very challenging. We had to stay, but everybody was really contributing, and it's really paid off for us. We invest in our people. We know that they're our most valuable asset. One of my former partners used to say, "Consultancy is interesting. Your assets go to zero every night when your people go home."
Yeah.
So it's a machine, and then you hope they come back. And we've been very fortunate with I think it's 97 or 98% retention rate as we have. Yeah, that we think we do it well. Almost not perfect by any means, but it's also we check ourselves, and we've been very blessed to get recognition from the Washington Post and from the Albuquerque Journal on best workplaces to work. We don't do that for the recognition. We do that as a means to check how we're doing with our employees, because those are blind surveys that are sent to our employees that we have nothing to do with it on the outside. And that is those people over many years, those people have done so well that the Department of Energy recognized us as the small business of the year. I think it was in June they gave us the award. You know, there's a lot of small businesses involved with the Department of Energy in the United States, and we got recognized as the best one, and that was just like a crowning jewel of recognition of what our people have been doing and delivering.
You know, it's interesting that, how people measure company sizes, right? Because you say small business and people think, oh, maybe you are just a taco shop down the street. No, yes, $100 million plus company, right?
Yeah, and depending on your industry code, right? I won't get into the detail, but depending on the industry and where we operate, we're still small business. What was technically engineering services involving aerospace, weapons, and environmental services, and we're clear there. But your observation is on point, because our success leads to us growing, leads to us entering what we call the middle market. Mm-hmm. We're no longer a small business in certain industry codes, so we had to plan to be in other industry codes for certain markets. But the bottom line is, one day we're competing against another small business. The next day we're competing against the Booz Allens and the Leidos and the large scale consulting firms. And so you have to be prepared for that.
Multi-billion operations, right?
Yes. And again, the set of people that we brought in and that really had to shift gears a couple of years ago to prepare for this, with another new accounting system and a contracts management system, and then scale the leadership team, that they're prepared to do more, to take more ownership of the company, because the CEO and COO don't have the bandwidth for such a large group of people. You know, that we have to change. And we by focusing on mission delivery, focusing on our people, really living servant leadership has all been critical to us so far successfully navigating this. And very pleased with our folks.
You touched a great point, servant leadership. How do you learn that leadership style?
I went to a trade school called the Naval Academy. That from the day we lowered our hand from taking our oath, they breathed, pushed, taught, trained leadership into us. My COO, Jeff Giangiuli, is my classmate from the Naval Academy. We laugh about this, that it was so ingrained in us, some of these leadership tools, tones, techniques, that we just don't understand why other people don't have them. Well, the United States invested 4 years in us to learn these things, and we've been fortunate to be able to use them to, one, serve in the military directly, and then serve in an area where we're still contributing. And the servant leadership, I don't think it was called servant leadership back in the 80s when I was learning it, but it was basically, I guess maybe it's some of my Christian background also gets into this, of looking to understand these people are the most important, and the best way we can do this is by serving them. Mm-hmm. It's not totalitarianism. We're not just directing them to do these things. We just embrace this. And then a lot of the talking heads out there about management have been promoting it for a couple decades, right? They're calling it servant leadership, but it was foundational to Jeff and me. And it's also foundational to a number of the other people we brought in. It really does work.
You must feel so honored that the actual military taught you these principles, right? Like, people ask themselves, why is the United States of America the leader of the world? You just said it. If this is what's being taught in the top military organizations and academies, I mean, if you have that servant leadership mentality, and the majority of the industries work like that, you're going to make great progress, right?
Indeed.
Because this is what it takes. Like for me, I didn't have that. I mean, I've been Christian all my life, but I forgot that I was supposed to be here to serve others. When I started my business, I got so afraid of going bankrupt that I make sure to protect the bottom line more than the people. And that very same thing almost got me out of business.
Well, yeah, your point's well. That one of our other, what's the statement? Corporate culture will eat strategy for lunch, right?
Yeah.
Well, fundamentally, to the company from day one, from those two scientists to set up the company, they always defined our success and measure how we're doing well beyond the bottom line. We actually have a health check we do that has like 18 factors to it. A couple of them are about people, about systems and so forth. That are we being successful is not driven by bottom line. The company has never been that way. However, we also recognize though that you have to manage that bottom line. I mean, it has to be real. It has to be managed. But we've been, by focusing on mission and manage that bottom line and focusing on the people, you end up getting there. You end up getting there, I think, faster and being able to sustain the company.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, I sometimes get humored by serial entrepreneurs, right? The serial entrepreneur. I said, if you think entrepreneurial is hard, try to take your company to a sustainable model and keep it growing every year.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and but sticking to these fundamental premises have been the secret sauce on us continuing to be positioned and growing into the future, to now and into the future.
That's beautiful. I went through a dramatic leadership style after I realized that I needed to include servant leadership. And little did I know that I was going to find that in the Bible.
Yeah.
Incredible, right? Like when you think about God becoming human and instead of becoming to rule this world, he came to wash the disciples' feet, right? Like
servant leadership.
And it's incredible. And it was in front of my eyes all my life. And I never happened to see it until finally the Lord woke me up, and now my companies are thriving. And because
wonderful.
It comes from the top, right? Like you become a servant to your people, and then this cascades down, right? Like culture comes from the top all the way down to the bottom. But if you're saying good words and you're not acting what you're saying, people find out, and the culture starts to break apart, right?
Indeed. One thing I did mention when you mentioned that, it popped in my head is, I'm having trouble remembering the consultant that but it was, you probably have seen numerous organization evolution graphics, how they find their way or they lose their way. We have a bell curve looking one that articulates from startup on the far left, that it's kind of chaotic because you're scrambling to figure out what you're doing. And then over a little bit of time, that chaos gets a little bit more manageable. And if you have good fortune, you continue to grow, but you end up growing to a point that you really need disciplined systems and so forth. There's too much going on, and we call it discipline, but not regimented. They're disciplined systems that we have great confidence in them, but they're not so regimented to take our flexibility away. Mm-hmm. And that it ends up on the 11 o'clock position on that graph. And how it's articulated is, if it goes over the top to the other side, that starts getting bureaucracies. You start getting off the mission and enamored with your own procedures and policies, or you start chasing things that don't mean anything. And to a commercial company, it ends up dying at the end because bureaucracy starts eating up the resources. You don't get your mission done. Budget-driven organizations continue to survive. That allows them to stay over there because the budget's sent to them anyway. So our struggle into the middle market, preparing for scaling the staff, scaling the leadership team, has been, how do we stay in that zone of entrepreneurial thinking, disciplined operations, and not allow ourselves to go over the apex of that graph onto the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I brief that every 6 months to our leadership team, And the servant leadership, the intonation of the culture. I show two people in tug of war, and it's the people that want additional systems, additional things so they can keep control, and the people that need entrepreneurialism. I said, that struggle will continue. I said, but we have to stay on top of it, that we find the balance. And that's part of the last thing. It's a series of trade-offs and balance.
And yeah, but I think, you will never find the balance. It's that push and pull, like
Yes,
you push a little bit and you have to pull back, and you keep going. It's almost like a moving wave. But as long as you're conscious that you are trying to achieve that balance, it will work out. I think I can attribute that to the success of my business. I've been in business for 19 years. I mean, it's not as long as you guys have, but in my field, I have a software consulting firm. Like you said, my staff goes away, my entire assets they go away at night, right?
yep,
And
Yep.
we are just as good as our last project.
indeed.
So when you get too strict, you start losing people. But when you get too flexible, you also start losing profits. So it's that beautiful middle ground, right? How do we achieve that, right?
That's right. And it's not static. It's got to be worked every day, every month, every quarter, every year. But what it informs the top level leadership, that we have to stay on top of it and don't think it's on autopilot. And that's, so far we've been navigating those waters pretty well.
But one of the things that Brian, one of the things that I admire from you is that you're a chairman of the board, you're the CEO, but you started with a $2 million company, and now you're into hundreds of millions of dollars. Most cases, what I see is that CEOs get changed to more experienced CEOs in order to afford the growth, but somehow you have grown your own leadership to keep up with the growth of the business. How do you manage that?
Well, one, I knew the skill set of when we were 2 full-time employees and so forth was insufficient. I'd had 9 years in a very large consulting firm, so I understood I understand might be too much, but at least had a good grasp of what's required. So to thrive in this industry. And I would have to say it's recognition of what I don't know, right? A recognition, I don't know it all. And I was able to get, for those areas that I would not become, like I am not a CPA. So at some point you had to get away from the, what would you say, the payroll clerk to the financial manager to the CPA. We had to grow with that. And I've welcomed trusted individuals to come in and take a look and advise me. And I've been blessed with being able to get very good people to join this company because of our corporate culture. And I just attribute it, I guess, maybe it's just relationships. Maybe it's relationships that have been the secret sauce on making that happen. I think it's going to continue to do that.
For sure. I congratulations for that. And of course, the Lord had a special blessing on you too, right? Because
Yes.
it's like I said, to me, you're like a unicorn. It's very hard to find CEOs like that. To give you an idea, I was involved with a startup about 7 years ago. They raised $5 million and they wanted to make it into a $1 billion company. So about a year into their operations, they hired this top executive from, I think it was from DHL or one of those big companies, multi-billion-dollar company. And this person came in and all he did was spend the money faster than they could breathe. And like they tried to put multi-billion-dollar operations on a tiny company that was just starting up, and they went bankrupt in 3 years. They had nothing.
That's exactly right. That particular scenario, Pierre Grand, who is the Brookhaven National Laboratory scientist, retired scientist that started the company with Tom Ward, he set a tone with the company on controlling the overhead, as it were, right? It's all very valuable. But more importantly, developed from his investment, his limited investment activities, he developed a notion that the quickest way to understand if a company is serious is the compensation of the leadership team that needs to be commensurate where they really are financially. And he said, now that can bite you because you want the top shelf person. You may not be able to pay them, so you may not get them. But he says it also reads into their commitment to the initiative, that they understand that the higher compensation, the payoff is years later. What are you committing to the company? Are you demanding $300,000 to run $1 million company? Or do you understand, we can't do that. That's just not wise. And so that's what we use the TechSource. And it was, it helped get us there. And oh, by the way, we had a scientist by the name of Malin Wilson that gave me 2 examples of exactly what you talked about. The venture capitalist came rolling in on a great technology idea. He was part of the technical team, and they felt compelled. They had to sign their guy that they trusted. And Malin just said he had absolutely no idea, nor did he have the capacity to understand the product. And he goes, it was from day one, you could tell this is not going to go well. And it didn't. Your scenario you described is what ended up happening. So we're fortunate we didn't have to do that.
It's beautiful. Brian, I would love to keep talking with you, but I know you're a very big executive and more than 40 minutes have gone by. So I'll ask you one last question before we finish the interview. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write on it?
Can I make it really personal?
Of course.
Christ is King.
Amen.
I am. Sorry, I mean, you're asking me. That's where it comes from down deep. If I had the ability, or some message like that to compel people to take a deep breath and think more about it, I'm a loss for words for anything beside that.
That's beautiful. You remind me. I live in Canada, and the woke and cancel culture here is 10 times worse than is in the States, to the point that it's really hard to talk about your faith. So I make a point to, if I can, to talk about my faith in every podcast I make.
Mm-hmm.
But the highway that takes us to the airport, to the Pearson Airport, right? I'm close to Toronto. This is like a 7-lane highway. It's one of the biggest highways in Canada. And this farmer, right in the middle of that busy highway, he actually purchased a huge billboard. And there is a red background with white letter that says Jesus saves, and it's full of lights. So every single car that goes through that highway sees this sign. Wow. And it's amazing because it's private property. So the government cannot shut it down,
Indeed. But so we're what are the companies you run or that you've sponsored? You told me briefly on our call, but I'm not recalling.
Yeah, so my main company is a software consulting firm called ISU Corp. We do custom solutions. We've been doing that for 19 years, but I'm involved with other companies. Like, we do real estate. We also have an artificial intelligence company in the States, mostly in technology.
Yeah, so let me just describe this before we have to sign off. One of the big adjustments into the middle market, what some of our younger folks have really gotten under us, is we've made some, as a consultancy, right? Government, in our case, government consultant. We've had commercial initiatives too, but by far, we support high technology, nuclear science, and engineering that our government pursues. We've invested in a company called Vibrant out of Albuquerque. We're trying to increase our offerings, but logically for our current client base, they do a non-destructive analysis using a sonic method that's a new adventure for us to get a piece of that and then see what we can do with it, providing it to the National Lab System and the plants that work with it. And then also we've gotten into a joint venture with a boutique custom fabric design and fabrication shop in Albuquerque that do some very high precision fabrications and control systems around it. So that adventure, we're trying to take a different tact here of start to offer these problem solutions instead of just individual consulting, but also what is your problem or what is your issue? Let us circle these amazing people around it and come up with a solution to deliver to you. And part of that solution may be alternatives to get prototypes made very quickly or to apply new technologies because it's so expensive to take parts off airplanes. You'd rather analyze them on it and so forth.
Right.
So we have an expanding role in our national defense still, but these new adventures are going to be really neat. And when consultancies start considering this, our margins are not like Google or anything where you make these investments. So big decisions and very strategic initiatives that we're embarking in. So TechSource is going to be an adventure to continue.
That's beautiful. Let me know if I can do anything to help you. It will be our pleasure for sure.
Oh, fantastic. So I guess happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas, Brian. Thank you so much for your time and for your service, by the way. Thank you. I love my job because I get to meet amazing people like you. And this has been one of the best hours that I spend in this entire month. So I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.